When most people talk about recall, they use the same analogy with precision. Like you're firing at a target and how many hits we have. And I think that analogy or metaphor is not the right one. For me, recall is more about like you're standing next to a pool and you're fishing. And you actually care about all the different documents you could catch, and not just, as in precision, how many of the documents you fetched are relevant. So you measure recall by comparing the relevant documents you caught with the total amount of relevant documents in the pool. And it basically measures how well the search engine captures all possible relevant results for a query. So how good are you at catching all the documents you want? In retrieval, this is basically calculated by taking the retrieved relevant documents and divided by the total relevant documents. So often you have a test data set where for each query you have a set of relevant documents defined, and you basically take this set and take the set of retrieved relevant documents and divide the latter from the former. And the most important question you have to answer is basically, when should you prioritize recall, or should you prioritize recall for your use case? And recall is especially relevant or interesting when missing information is very costly. This is something, for example, for legal research, where you actually have to cover a breadth of different cases which happen, but also a breadth of, for example, commentaries. And you are opting into the direction of giving all possible relevant documents as opposed to giving a few but highly relevant documents. The second one is basically when comprehensiveness is key. For example, in academia, systematic literature reviews are supposed to cover the entire space of previous literature, which is impossible in most cases, but you should at least have heard about most of it. And the last one is when rare items must be found. Because rare items are always harder to find because you have less data on them, you actually have also a higher chance of catching them if you prioritize recall, because you tend to retrieve more documents. And this again basically goes into the precision recall trade-off. Like recall again of all relevant documents, how many did we find, and precision of the documents we found, how many are relevant. And depending on what you pick, you basically can pick different strategies. For example, like in our metaphor, you can pick the wide net strategy, which would be optimizing for recall. So you have a very wide net to sweep through the pool, and you're likely to catch more relevant documents, but you also are likely to catch more irrelevant one, which leads to potentially lower precision. And then the second one would be an angle or a narrow net. So you use more of a small one, and this would lead to basically higher precision. These are just like the opposite strategies rather for completeness, because I think the metaphor doesn't hold up as well for precision. There it's more like about the shooting one. And if you want to improve recall, you first can use broader search terms. You also can implement query expansion, which basically adds additional search terms, but with the caveat that you're using OR operators instead of AND if you're using Boolean search. If you're using a phrase and term search, unless you're making an exact match, so you're putting it within apostrophes, you can also just add terms. And the last one would be basically to incorporate synonyms or interrelated terms, or what we've also seen with the recent release of Mixspread on BMX, you can do a query augmentation with, for example, LLMs, where you, based on a source query of the user, generate multiple additional ones and use all of those to retrieve. And one important thing is high recall doesn't guarantee good search results. So if you would, for example, just throw all of the documents you have in your database at the user, you would have 100% recall because you will return all the relevant ones.